Hello everyone, welcome to this little live session that is all about beating the winter slump. So let's give everyone a moment just to join in, and then I will get cracking. Obviously this session will be shared, so if you are watching live and need to jump off or jump back in later, then you can rewatch it. Any questions, whack them in the comments and I will come to them. Some people have already submitted questions, so I will cover those in and amongst what I am talking about, but hopefully this will be a good and sort of slightly interesting dynamic session. So as we know from the title of the session, we are beating the winter slump with antioxidants. And when people talk about sort of like winter wellness and that kind of thing, they mainly just focus on the immune system, which I am going to do because the immune system is an important part of this. But the winter slump isn't just to do with immune function, so I'm trying to come at it from a slightly different angle. So if we compare winter and summer, winter is good in a great many ways. We have Christmas and we get to wear cozy jumpers and nest inside and watch wonderful movies and have a great time. But it's not very good for being metabolically efficient. Because if we look at where we get energy from, we get contribution from a few different places. And the relative influx of which one of those is more dominant is dependent on the season and our exposure to natural light. So if we kind of like break these down a little bit, you either get energy from the food that you eat, you can also make energy or sort of perpetuate energy from your stress response, so using adrenaline and cortisol, or you get energy from your circadian rhythm, which is exposure to natural light. So in the winter, because we have shorter days when it's darker, we actually have to rely more on our adrenal system and on the food that we're eating to support our energy metabolism. And so what that then does is it means that we need more antioxidants, because antioxidants are used to make cellular energy and also to detoxify stress hormones. And what we can find for a lot of people is because they don't necessarily change their eating habits in terms of increasing abundancy of antioxidant-rich foods or supplementing them, that they actually then find that their ability to produce energy in the amounts that they need goes down. And also, as you will find out in a second, we use a lot of those same nutrients, the antioxidants, for our immune function. And when that's working harder in the winter, we then don't have quite enough to spread around. So the key ones that you would want to look at from the kind of energy metabolism side of things, and also supporting mood, because I don't know about you, but there is something about a cold, wintry, grey day that starts to make me feel a little bit blue. And when like things like Christmas have gone, what do we then do until it gets to March? So vitamin D is really important for cognitive function and mood stability. So making sure you've got an optimal vitamin D level, which would be something in the region of 85 to 120 nanomoles per litre, depending on what you would need. If you've got any pre-existing medical conditions like an autoimmune disease, or you know that you have a slightly less sensitive vitamin D receptor or an inability to convert vitamin D, that's all something you'd have to do with genetic testing. You wouldn't be able to necessarily work that out without looking at it objectively. Then yeah, that would depend on what you need. But as a functional nutritionist medic, you would want to be above about 85. The deficiency state is 50, but if you're getting anywhere near that, then you're going to start seeing issues with sort of vitamin C insufficiency anyway, so just don't go near that bit. The other things that are really important are, or just very useful, I would say, would be things like CoQ10 is a great one. Helps with things like muscular function, that kind of stuff, but it's also very good for the brain. So if you find that you do get a little bit sort of like less motivated or anything like that during the winter, then supplemental CoQ10 can be really handy. Vitamin C is a really important one, which I'm going to talk about in more detail when I talk about the immune system. But from a overall body function perspective, and from the stress response and things, you need vitamin C to be able to break down cortisol. And if you are relying more on your stress hormones to make you feel energetic in the lack of exposure to natural light, you will need additional vitamin C. And what people can then find is the reason they get more coughs and colds during the winter is that actually they're spreading their vitamin C too thinly. The thing about vitamin C is it's a water-soluble nutrient. So you can get it in lots of different forms, and the cheapest form is ascorbic acid. But if you get it in a water-soluble form like ascorbic acid, you will only ever be able to take up a certain amount in any one go, and you will then pee out the rest. So whenever you are trying to increase dosage of vitamin C, you have to take it in split doses over the course of the day. Now, the difference in types of supplementation is if you take a liposomal supplement, like the LipoLife range, then what you get is the ability to stabilize a water-soluble nutrient at a higher dosage and actually use that without it going out in your urine. You would still have to incrementally dose over the course of the day because you'll go through it so fast. But either the LVC1, the LVC2, or the LVC9, they're all 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C per dose, which is a teaspoon. And if you took 3 of those per day, that's what we would class as being the optimal kind of therapeutic level of vitamin C to actually get into your cells and work in that way. So you don't have to take that the whole time, but that would be if somebody was exhibiting signs of poor vitamin C status, whether that is that they're getting frequent infections, whether their skin is very dry and kind of cracking, if they get very easy bruising, or they don't heal particularly well, which is actually part of your immune system in terms of defense as well, which I'm going to explain in a second. But anything like that, nosebleeds as well as another one. If you are getting those symptoms, then you would do the 3 doses per day for probably about 2 to 4 weeks, depending on the intensity of your symptoms, and then you could drop down to doing 2 doses per day. Personally, for most of my clients and for myself, I will take 2 doses of vitamin C per day throughout the winter, and a lot of the studies in terms of longevity and protection against any kind of sort of other chronic conditions is to take multiple doses of vitamin C per day. There are other vitamin C's within the range. The reason I talk about LVC1, LVC2 and LVC9 is because they are the 1,000 milligram dose, so that's 1 gram per dose. There are ones which are slightly lower, so they're 500 milligrams, which is absolutely fine to take. And if you are just looking them from a maintenance perspective, then that's what you could choose. The LVC1 and LVC2 are unflavoured, and the LVC9 has peach flavour. Test me on that later, but I think it's a peach flavour. So yeah, and the LVC1 is a soy phospholipid, and the LVC2 is a sunflower one. Not going to dive into what that means in the body, but as a very quick thing, sunflower phospholipid, higher in choline, more nervous system supportive, soy phospholipid, more about heart health, blood pressure, estrogen balance. So there you go. Moving on, what else are we going to say about mood generally? Things like zinc and magnesium, really important because again, the impact of lack of proper exposure to natural light. And I don't know if you can tell, but the intensity of light shining on me right now is because I have a vitamin D lamp on me. So we don't have the opportunity, a lot of us, to say, right, well, now that it's dark, I'm going to live completely in sync with my natural world, which is to, only do things that are active during sunlight hours. Because as we get towards the 21st of December in the Northern Hemisphere, that's not a very long working day. And obviously we then have to be on electronic screens, which give out different kinds of light. They don't stimulate the brain in the same way, and that can disrupt our sleep cycle, which then perpetuates this idea of being lower in energy and not feeling particularly great in ourselves. So a vitamin D lamp is a really, really good one that you could try. Excuse me, but also looking at things like not overdoing your caffeine when it's dark, because that will then disrupt what else is going on in your body. You can also look at things like using carnosine, which is another one which is quite a good antioxidant boost for the nervous system. Creatine is another one, especially if you're plant-based, that's quite a handy one to use. And doing things like allowing your body to come to wakefulness through gentle movement rather than just like getting up and starting the day. But as I say, we now have to live out of sync with our natural environments. But in the same way that technology could be a negative, we have the benefit of technology in the sense that we can support ourselves with things like supplements and that kind of stuff to overcome that as an issue. Right, I am going to now talk about the immune system. So what I thought I would do is give a very brief overview of the immune system generally, and then try and highlight some specific nutrients. And the one thing that I was going to say that I totally forgot about was the idea of sleep. So the other couple of things that you want to think about with sleep are zinc and magnesium. So if you are struggling with your sleep, which is then perpetuating low mood and that kind of thing, the LLZ1 is liposomal zinc, which is very useful because zinc is one of the cofactors to produce melatonin, which is your kind of like trigger to go to sleep. And magnesium again is part of that process. So again, if like it can help people to calm down, it can make you feel nice and zen, but it also will actually help you produce neurotransmitters which make you go to sleep and stay asleep a bit better, which is a good thing to be doing. Right, the immune system. So we are talking about winter wellness as well. You have 2 main parts of your immune system, which some people don't know. So you have your innate and your adaptive immunity, and they do work together and they kind of feed into each other. So your innate immunity is the stuff that's sort of like there the whole time. It's your fast response, and it's To say that it's unspecific is a bit unfair, but at the same point, it's just kind of like, if you get hit with something, your innate immunity is there to just stop you from like falling over straight away. So it's the protection that's offered by your skin and your mucous membranes, whether that's in your mouth and your nose or your eyes, all that kind of stuff. And also some like actual defense cells and proteins. So all of the outer surfaces of your body are key as like a physical barrier, which is also why when I mentioned before about things like vitamin C being important for skin surface, you want to make sure that your skin is really robust during the winter. And a lot of people will find that they get a lot drier and that kind of stuff. And that can be something very simple, like you don't realise because it's cold, but you are sitting in a central heated environment, that you are losing a lot of moisture. So you might need to be better hydrated. So making sure you're having plenty of water, but also look at things like your vitamin C status, because it's important for your collagen function. And if you aren't healing well, or your skin is dry and flaky, then that's not going to be a particularly good thing if you do get something on your skin or into your eyes that then could pass into your body. Also things like your essential fats. So making sure that you've got a really good omega-3 status is a really important one. A lot of people will slightly switch most people will slightly switch their diet from summer to winter. And actually, if we're eating more things like cooked foods, maybe we're having a little bit less fish and going for more meat if that's the kind of diet that you have. I don't know, if people are having different kinds of breakfast, they might not include so many nuts and seeds or other oils and bits and pieces. You can find that you're just not hitting your targets. And actually, from an antioxidant perspective, the raw food to cooked food thing is quite an important one to touch on, because antioxidants are all the colourful pigments that you find in foods, and a lot of them are denatured by the action of heat. A couple of them, so one like lycopene, which you get in tomatoes, is actually enhanced by heating, but most of them are broken down by the presence of heat. So yes, we would add them in supplementally, but one of my quick tricks is if, say, you are cooking broccoli and green beans and sprouts for dinner, reserve like a couple of pieces of broccoli and just shred them up really finely, and then when you come to serve, sprinkle them over the top. It just means that you know that you're still getting some of those raw food nutrients in, or obviously you can make things like sauces and salsas and pestos and that kind of stuff and get them in then. Eat little bits of fruit, have like a raw carrot with some hummus or something like that. But if that's too active a thought to kind of think like, on top of what I'm already eating, I need to make sure I'm doing something else, then whenever you are preparing food, just take a little bit. And I mean, the equivalent of a tablespoon per serving is fine, just to make sure that you're kind of topping those bits up. So that would be an idea. Going back to the innate immune system, I have written myself notes, but this always happens. I have too many things that I want to say and then I zip backwards and forwards. So if you have questions or you're getting confused, do just wave at me and I'll try and make it a bit clearer. So in addition to the actual physical barrier of your skin, you have other things like acid and enzymes and mucus and tears and saliva that are all part of that physical barrier as well, because they contain things like enzymes and defense cells that will prevent bacteria or viruses from actually getting into the body. So yeah, that's your kind of innate immune system. If you do find that something crosses the skin barrier, the innate immune system will still do a couple of other things. So there are sort of special cells that will kind of be interact with that. So that's what we would call acute inflammation. I'm always really keen to differentiate here, because I'm going to talk about chronic inflammation, and acute inflammation is really important. So imagine I cut myself and it didn't clot and I didn't get a scab and the sides didn't swell and join together. I'd be in a pretty sticky situation because I would just bleed. So your innate immune system is the thing that kind of like sorts out the stuff with inflammation at that point. So it's a really important part of your immune system, and that's dictated by cellular response. You also then have certain cells that will go and like scavenge and neutralize germs. So if you get, say, something in your eye, or if you were to cut yourself and it got pussy, I don't know how to make this sound nice. Basically what you've got then is you've got cells that have gone to that place, they've engulfed the germ into themselves, and then they've digested it down, basically, and then they've exuded pus as a breakdown product, which is actually a good sign. Obviously, if you get something like an abscess where the pus is contained, that's not a particularly good thing and you would need to get it drained, but actually having a pus response to something like that is a good thing. Similarly, fever or like heat around a swollen thing, if it's well contained, is actually your innate immune system helping to kill off bacteria by using heat. So obviously, unless it's a situation like a young child or an elderly person with a really unregulated, really high fever, the best thing to do is actually let a fever burn itself out. Support somebody by obviously making sure that they have cold compresses, make sure they're well hydrated, monitor the fever so that it doesn't get too bad and it doesn't stay at a certain level for too long. But usually we get fevers in the evening because our cortisol naturally drops as we produce melatonin, and cortisol is an anti-inflammatory. So this is why usually when you get a cold, you feel worse when you get into bed at night. You think, I just want to go to sleep because if I sleep, I'll feel better. And that's when the cough comes, and that's when the fever hits, because it's when your body's being its most active about getting rid of infection. But if you can avoid taking things like paracetamol that would actually calm the fever down, then that's a good thing because it would allow your body to kind of burn it out. So that's the other bit of the innate immune system. Apart from also there's part of that pus process that's slightly disgusting is that when that happens, your innate immune system actually puts things out onto the cell surface, which then feeds into your adaptive immunity, which would then recognize that next time and be able to mount a more targeted response rather than just this kind of engulfing, digesting thing. And the other thing that you have is something called natural killer cells, which basically do exactly what they say. They look out for any cells that have changed. So whether that's a cell that's been impregnated by a virus or a cell that's becoming tumorous and like growing, then your natural killer cells will go and mount a response and basically kill that changed cell and move on from it. So that's your innate immunity. It's kind of like the border force. They're kind of they're going around with like big clubs and axes and stuff, and anything that comes in, they're just going to knock it down. But they might miss stuff sometimes, and it's not particularly specialized, but it is quick. The difference then, if we go to the adaptive immunity, is that it's the more targeted approach, and it's based on exposure. So this is when we talk about things like antibodies. So it takes longer the first time you're exposed to something, but then your body remembers that for next time, and then next time it happens, it's a really quick response, and it would be more targeted and kind of sort you out. This is also why for some illnesses you only catch them once in your life. So your adaptive immune system would then remember that, and then you become immune because your body has a blueprint of how to deal with it, and it's no longer able, that whatever it is, to get in and cause a problem. The thing that you can find with adaptive immunity is that this can be something that becomes overactive if there is sort of misrecognition or overstimulation of the immune system. And this is also, again, the thing about being very specific. A lot of stuff will talk about being immune boosting. You don't always want to boost the immune system. The immune system is very good at doing its job, but if it goes over the top and becomes hypersensitive or hyperreactive, you are in a big load of trouble because it actually just needs to be well modulated and well balanced and be able to turn off. So this is where we differentiate with something like chronic inflammation. So like I say, acute inflammation is really important and it keeps you alive. Chronic inflammation is like a slow simmer in the background that everyone's forgotten about, and it's actually causing progressive damage to your body. So issues with chronic disease are all based around chronic inflammation with the immune system that has just not worked out how to turn itself off. And the second side of that is that if your immune system is constantly working under the surface on something it probably doesn't need to be doing, that's a constant burn of energy that you don't really want, and use of resources that you don't really want to be happening. So that's just kind of a differentiation there. So what we're actually trying to do when we make our immune system more functional is to modulate and enhance the proper response of both the innate and the adaptive immune system, which doesn't quite roll off the tongue as easily as immune boosting. So I see why people went there. But if we want to be really specific and actually say what we're talking about, we want to use my version. So yeah, that's that. Right. So I thought what I would now do is highlight my kind of key points for supporting immune function in a really good way over the winter. Because I got a lot of questions about like, what do I do if I get a cold? And what happens if I don't know, get really bad mucus and all of this kind of thing. So I'm gonna touch on all of those. And I will just say at the moment for this webinar, Life are very kindly, because they asked me what kind of products I would suggest, and I said, well, it's really difficult because I would have to pick for the person, because I have to be really specific about everything. So basically what you can do is, if you wanted to, if you like any of the things that I've been suggesting, is if you go onto the Life website and use 15 off, you can basically build your own winter wellness pack, and then also use Nat Nourish 10 on top of that. So you basically get 15 and then 10% off, which is pretty good. So you can get your vitamin D and all the other bits that I'm talking about if you would like to, or you want to get some CoQ10 and some carnosine and mix it all together. Right, so vitamin C. I'm also just going to tell you some bits about how these things actually work. So if you are interested, you know why we would use vitamin C for our immune system. So like I said, it has a couple of different actions, and one of them would be things like sorting out your cortisol level, also maintaining collagen synthesis. It's also really important for the absorption of iron, and iron is really important for general bodily function and things like energy levels of fatigue, and also mood. So it's mainly to do with plant-based iron sources, but it does impact like heme iron as well. So you get non-heme iron and heme iron. Basically what you want to do is make sure that when you are having something that is rich in iron, whether that's a meat source, whether it's green leafy vegetables, whether it's beans, pulses and legumes, whether it's molasses, that you have some form of vitamin C alongside that, whether again that is parsley or raw tomatoes or broccoli, raw broccoli, or citrus fruits. As long as you put those together, then you get enhanced uptake of iron. For some people, they will still struggle with iron uptake, and you might then use a vitamin C supplement alongside meals. Things that would block that absorption would be things like tannin-rich foods, pomegranate, green tea, coffee. Getting off topic, but anyway, it's interesting. So the way that vitamin C actually enhances your immune system is it enhances that, I can't get it out of my head now, the cells that engulf and then cause pus. So that bit, that part of the innate immune system, it does that. It also enhances your body's ability to fight infection once infection has entered the body. So that's quite an important one. And it will also shorten the recovery from colds and flu viruses. So when somebody adds that kind of triple dose of vitamin C into their routine, and this is something that I used a lot with COVID infection, it drops symptom presentation from something like 5 to 7 days to 2 to 3 days. So it's quite significant. So if you didn't do anything else over the course of the winter, it's a really useful one to do. And if you've got kids who bring home coughs and colds and seemingly are like always sick at the moment because their immune systems haven't been exposed to so much over the last few years, safeguarding yourself with a really good vitamin C level will be very useful to you. Right, vitamin C is number one. The next one is zinc. And again, like I said, zinc is very important for mood balance and all of that kind of stuff. If we look at the kind of like slumping sensation that we get in winter, but it's crucial for the normal development of innate immunity. So this is why we talk about it a lot with children, and with all of the Life supplements, you can use them with kids. It's just about basically dosing based on their body weight. So adult dosages are stated on the bottles, which would be teaspoons, but if you're going to be giving them to a child, then you would get half teaspoons, unless they are very small for their age, in which case you give quarter teaspoons. But yeah, so that should be fine. So zinc is very important for the innate immune system for multiple different reasons. And though a lot of the kind of like seeking cells that sort of patrol in order to be able to fight off infection are very, very limited by zinc deficiency. So when we see people who are deficient in zinc, one of the quickest signs to be able to tell that is if somebody really loves very strong tasting foods, because one of the things that zinc is also integral for is taste perception. So I talk about this all the time, but as a very quick thing, if you absolutely love chili, salt, pickles, mustards, vinegars, and you are pouring those onto your food or you're using them a lot compared to other people, it might be that your zinc levels are quite low. It's a very normal thing to happen in the way that we live now, because zinc is very reliant for uptake on really good stomach acid. And if I had to pick one problem that most people come to me with, is that their stomach acid isn't sufficient to actually, it's because of stress, basically. Stress will just diminish your body's ability to produce stomach acid. So that's something about zinc. It's also really important for wound healing. So when again, we're talking about that really important barrier for the skin, zinc is really important for that. And it also, primarily for the adaptive immune system, activates the enzymes that then cause a chain reaction that allow your body to respond to any kind of pathogenic invasion, so to speak. I pulled up some stats because I always like these. So in 2011, some French, and it's a bit outdated science by now, isn't it? But I just like these kind of things. Some French scientists discovered that you can use zinc to help cells destroy E. coli, which is always an interesting one. And it just basically overloads them and then poisons them, killing them off, which is quite a good one because E. coli is a commensal bacteria, which has a very wonderful habit of becoming an opportunist and causing people all kinds of issues with their digestive tract. The recommended daily allowance for zinc is like not very high, actually. Hold on, what is it? It's 7 milligrams for women and 9.5 milligrams for men. But the therapeutic dose would be 30 milligrams per day. So as a standard amount, if you want to be taking zinc just as a support over the winter, aim for about 15 milligrams, which is the LLZ1, the liposomal zinc's standard dose. If you then became ill, you would then increase that. Or actually, if you're in a house with an ill person, take 2 teaspoons per day, 1 in the morning and 1 in the evening, just alongside a meal. And that will help your body to kind of upregulate its immune defenses, basically. The one thing you wouldn't want to do is take more than if you're taking 30 milligrams of zinc, you don't take that on its own for longer than about 2 to 3 weeks, because zinc and copper share an absorption site. And although you need 15 times more zinc than copper, you don't want to be giving a therapeutic dose of zinc without copper for a prolonged period of time. Otherwise, you can start to just outcompete it, and that can actually cause issues with things like liver enzyme balance and other bits and pieces. So don't overdo it on the zinc. 15 milligrams to maintain, 30 milligrams to treat or support, or whatever the word you want to use. It tends to cut the length of colds, similarly to vitamin C, I think it cut it down by 75% compared to placebo, which is quite a significant amount if you think about the amount of coughs and colds that people come down with. And if you don't have the opportunity to rest as everyone would love to if they have a cold, it's a very good way of not just denying the fact that you're poorly and carrying on, but a way of actually getting your body to work a lot better, and then you can move on with your life. There are lots of different kinds of zinc. Again, if you don't have access to the liposomal one, then zinc lozenges are quite good if you are sort of like coughs and coldy, because you can obviously have them right at the back of the throat, and that's usually zinc gluconate. Zinc picolinate is another one, but if you have the option for the liposomal, then go to that one, because you're going to get 95% bioavailability of that supplement, which means that you are getting your 30 milligrams, rather than if you're thinking you're taking 30 milligrams, but then actually you're only getting about 45% bioavailability of the supplement. You're probably going to have to take a lot more. And lots of zinc in a capsule can make you feel really nauseous. So that's the other thing. If you don't take the liposomal, do not take 30 milligrams all in one go, because you will feel very, very sick, which isn't very nice. And that's because it needs that stomach acid to break it down for absorption. Right. I spoke very quickly then. Okay, vitamin D is a really interesting one, because we've been unknowingly using it to treat infections for a really long period of time. In sanatoriums, where people used to be sent when they had tuberculosis to recover, that was the idea, that people went to the sea and they were exposed to sun, and that made them better, because we were looking at vitamin D as a way to support immune function and recovery. It's been used a lot and tested a lot for respiratory tract infections. We now know that it's important for so many different things in the body, including stuff like blood sugar regulation, brain function, prevention of neurodegeneration, loads of things like gut integrity and all of that kind of stuff, which is integral as well for your immune system. But specifically, if people are very chesty, if their weak point is their sinuses or their chest and they get bronchitis and that kind of stuff, having a really solidly good vitamin D level is very protective, but also helps them to recover a lot faster. This isn't one that you have to multiply dose over the course of the day, because you will uptake and store it. So you could just take a full dose all in one go. Best thing to do is, if you don't know your vitamin D level and you're wondering about it, is to do a blood spot finger prick analysis at home through someone like Thriver or Better You, and then basically work out where you're sitting on that range that I mentioned of being around like 85 to 110 nanomoles per litre, and then kind of dosing based on that. If you are very, very low in vitamin D, you need to take vitamin D with K to make sure that it's used for skeletal health, which is one of the main things that we do vitamin D for. But if you need additional support on top of that, because your levels are very low, you'd probably want to do an isolated vitamin D, and then do a vitamin D and K2, like the LVK1 and LVK1, LVD1, or the LVD2, and mix those together. If anyone has any specific questions about that, please let me know, and I will make it sound a little bit less complicated. But you just wouldn't want to take loads and loads of vitamin K to meet the vitamin D requirement that you had by just taking a combined one. You might just need to add extra vitamin D on top of that. People with things like, I'm looking at some, I always pull up some example stats and then I never say them. So people who were vitamin D deficient, showed a 60% increased risk of upper respiratory tract infection than those who had sufficient levels, even after adjusting the variables of things like season, age, gender, body mass, and race, which can be obviously effective on things like predisposition to infection. Also very useful in treatment or support of asthma and COPD, which is obstructive pulmonary disease. So yes, we also, very interestingly, have vitamin D receptors on a lot of our immune cells, so it can actually directly activate them as well. So yes, lots of different things for vitamin D, which basically means everyone should have a very, very solid vitamin D status. Couple that people might not be aware of is I wanted to highlight iodine. Iodine is something that would have naturally been very rich in our diet because we would have had more things like sea vegetables. We didn't de-iodize things like our salts, and we naturally it would just have been more omnipresent in our diet than it is now. There are fortified foods with iodine, or you could just eat seaweed if you wanted to. I like things like seaweed seasonings for people who don't actually love seaweed, because you can just add it on and it gives that kind of savoury umami flavour to a meal. Or you could add in something like some potassium iodide, of which there is one in the range. You don't need loads of iodine, so you would just follow the dosage instructions that are on the bottle. But it supports the innate immune system in fighting bacterial and viral infections. So again, with the fact that our bodies haven't been exposed as much as they would do over the last couple of years, people are needing more support at the moment than they would do otherwise, and this could just be something that gets kind of added into there. Somebody asked me about the cold hands, warm heart situation, and this is just the idea that obviously you like whether that's like a thing or whether it's not a thing. If you're constantly cold and it's uncomfortable, then you would need to do like standard checks into things like thyroid function and circulation and making sure that you're moving enough. Because a lot of the time people don't realise that if you sit and you stagnate, your muscles don't move, and when your muscles create a huge amount of heat for the body. So actually just doing things like that and making sure that your muscle mass is sufficient to actually keep you warm is quite an important one. People sort of say like, oh, you've got to have a certain amount of body fat, which you definitely do because it's insulation. But if you don't have enough muscle, your muscles will sit there and metabolically be active even when you're sitting still. And that actually is part of your temperature regulation. So look into that, but also check your iodine levels, which is an interesting one because the thyroid, which iodine is very important for, is linked to your hypothalamus, which regulates your body temperature. So that's an interesting one. Or if, like me, you're just a naturally cold in the extremities person, nice hand warmers. You can wear little bands around your wrists which keep you warm, and nice cozy socks, and make sure that you get up and move around quite a bit during the day, and then you won't feel cold. It's not necessarily a sign of anything insidious. It can just be that you have naturally low blood pressure or a very efficient kind of heart which pumps once a minute. Don't know what I'm talking about there. Your pulse rate is quite low, so if your heart rate is quite low, obviously you're only getting a rush of warm blood at sort of like a certain interval, whereas somebody's heart's beating quite fast will flood the body with more heat and oxygenated blood more quickly. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. It can be. It's a really good sign of metabolic fitness. Right, okay, last two, and then I promise I will leave you to your evenings. Nucleotides and curcumin. So nucleotides are the little building blocks of your DNA. And in order to create an immune response, you have to make more DNA. So actually using nucleotides as a supplement is one of the most promising and interesting things that we have supporting immune function, but also just longevity of the body, so the avoidance of disease and ill health in the long term. In the lipolife range, they have the nucleotide complex, which is the LLN1, and they have the LN2, which is NMN. So I love using both of them. I use LLN1, the nucleotide complex, as like a general specific immune function supporter. It's really good for the gut as well. And like I said, you have a huge amount to say about gut health when it comes to the immune system, because you have like upwards of 75-80% of your immune system is found in your gut. I cannot go into that in great detail today, but I will do at another point. But this is where the benefits of things like fermented foods come in, because of all your probiotic bacteria, and your vitamin D as well, because it links the gut together, and your nucleotides, because it encourages the intestinal lining to be well preserved and turned over, and it's wonderful and marvellous. There is a multivitamin actually within the lipolife range, which is LVC5, I think, which is really great because it does actually contain nice maintenance doses of a lot of the things that I've spoken about, but also nucleotides, which you'll never find in another kind of like multi-complex. And this would be for somebody who eats a really good quality diet. They feel pretty robust in terms of their immune function, but after listening to this, they go, you know what, I do just want to make sure that I've got everything in place. Or maybe you've got a teenager who like will eat intermittently in terms of having green veg and then want to eat junk the rest of the time. You're like, what can I add in just to cover all of their bases to make sure that they're getting their nutritional requirements and keeping themselves healthy and well ongoing. So that's the LBC5. And then last one, curcumin, so from turmeric. It's sort of mainly known for its anti-inflammatory effects, so it's a really good one for modulating that immune function and making sure that your body is responding in a really nice, well-balanced way. Because what tends to happen with things like overstressed bodies, irregular blood sugar fluctuations, is that if you can imagine, you could be this person who sits and has a really like nice, easy debate, and I ask you a question and I say like, okay, right, I've got this as an option. How do you want to respond? And you're sitting there nice and calmly and you go, logically and rationally from my previous experience, I can do this, I can do that, and there's my answer. Or you could be really stressed and hyper and then you walk over to me, shout in my face, and I shout back. And that's kind of what a hypersensitive immune system will do. It's not logical, it's not rational, it will just respond. And that's what a lot of people can have. And that then progressively over time depletes resources. And then they find that they actually suffer their immune system. Their immune function becomes suppressed or depressed over time. So yeah, in addition to just being an anti-inflammatory, curcumin in sort of therapeutic levels is also supportive of optimal natural killer cell function, and the engulfing ones, and also your B and T cells, which are your adaptive immune ones too. Right. So that was 40 minutes of me talking very quickly about the immune system and about some little bits and tips for supporting wellness and energy over the course of the winter. I hope they were helpful. If you have any questions, as always, let me know. And like I say, jump onto LifeLife's website if you want any of these bits and pieces, or you're interested in just having a look and make the most of that pretty stinkingly good deal. So it's 15 off, 15 off, and Nat Nourish 10, which will give you a pretty damn good discount to keep you bouncing and flying through winter. Yes, I'm trying to think. I'm glad you enjoyed it. So just out of interest, I know that people are always like, oh, but what do you take? So my current regime for myself is that I take the LVD1, which is the vitamin D and K2, because I checked my levels and I am sitting very happily at 100 nanomoles. So I'm just taking a maintenance dose of those two together. I'm using the resveratrol, the CoQ10, the nucleotides, the carnosine, and the LVC2 in the morning. And then in the evening, I do the same thing, but I swap the CoQ10 and add the magnesium before I go to bed. And then I take the zinc probably every other day, because I know that I have really good stomach acid and I do eat quite a lot of zinc-rich foods, and I do like things like oysters, and so I'll have those every now and again. So I just pop in a little bit of extra zinc, say if I'm going out or I'm not paying quite as much attention as I should do to my sleep and having too much fun and that kind of thing. So yes. Right, I will leave you all to the rest of your evenings, mornings, wherever you are, and any extra questions, pop them under the video in the comments. Okay.